Welcome to another Bandology interview. Bandology is a Canadian nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids via education, collaboration, and community.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bandology's interview series. My name is Sandy Wright, and I have the pleasure today of talking to Andrea Unrau, the program director and a teacher at the Sarah McLachlan School of Music in Vancouver. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you, Sandy?
I am good, and I'm very excited to talk to you because you have a really interesting sort of kind of experience and role in sort of music education. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do right now and sort of like what your the positions are?
Yeah, so I work for the Sarah McLachlan School of Music, which is a charity that is based here in Vancouver on the unceded and traditional ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. And my job is as a program director and faculty member. So I also teach. I teach piano, voice. I teach the musical theater program, and I teach a partnership program with an organization called CAN, which stands for the Canucks Autism Network. So that's all students with autism.
That is awesome. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Sarah McLachlan School of Music?
Totally. So the Sarah McLachlan School of Music was started in 2002 by famous Canadian artist, Sarah McLachlan.
Founder of Little Fair.
Yeah, exactly. Founder of Little Fair and proponent of lots of important causes. And when she noticed that music programs were being cut from schools all over Canada, but especially where she lived in BC, that there was this lack of access to free, high quality music education. And she wanted to do something about that. So she started a program that started pretty small and now has grown. We're actually at 3 locations. So we're in Vancouver, and there's also a location in Surrey, BC, and in Edmonton, Alberta. And we have about 700 students-ish in the Vancouver program and over 1,000 students total. It's a non-auditioned, totally free program for kids and youth in the community who would benefit most. So usually that's youth that could be facing financial or social emotional barriers to accessing music education.
How did you sort of get your start in music? How did you get to, when was the first time you picked up an instrument kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started out as a piano player. So I have the story of there sort of just being an old upright piano at my parents' house, which I was very lucky to be able to access, but, you know, sort of banging on it, playing around with it, trying different things. And I think I first took lessons from my local church director when I was probably 6. And bounced around between a bunch of different teachers, and then ended up really inspired when I was 12 or 13 by my piano teacher, John Lumen, now deceased, but awesome piano player and teacher in St. Catharines, who taught in St. Catharines, Ontario, who was my first teacher trainer. He's the first person who gave me the opportunity to teach little kids and get them started in music.
That's awesome. I also teach piano. One of my favorite things to do is get kids started. It's so cool to see them go from this is a weird thing with a bunch of keys, and then 3 weeks later, I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, totally. And they're showing their parents. They're over here, this is the 3 black bears or whatever.
Yes. So what drew you exactly from sort of that first experience teaching to know you wanted to do it sort of long-term as your career, basically?
Yeah, totally. I actually never really thought that I would do music as a career. I've never really been that much of a player. I sort of think of myself as a helper. I really like arranging. I love teaching. I love collaborating with other people. So I never really thought of myself as being a musician. But then when I went to university, I thought, okay, I'm going to get a science degree. I'm going to get a real career. And then in a psychology course one day, I learned about the psychology of music. And suddenly I was like, I can do that.
Yeah. So that was sort of the moment you're like, oh, music cognition, how people understand music. That's the sort of place I want to be at.
Yeah, it was kind of the idea where I had always done music stuff on the side. Like even, as a high school student, as a university student, I would teach lessons on the side. I would accompany a choir on the side. I would play in bands on the side. But I never sort of thought of that as being like the main focus of my career. And then once I heard about music cognition, I was like, oh, great. I like psychology. I like child development. And now there's this, I can shoehorn music like back into it. And so I dove straight into music cognition.
That's awesome. Can you, for the people among us who haven't necessarily heard of the field of music cognition, though we did interview Emily Wood from the McMaster Institute of Music in the Mind, that you should go check out. Mark did a great interview of that with her, talking about this kind of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about what music cognition is?
Totally. I will also plug checking out, even just as well as watching the interview, Google the McMaster Institute for Music in the Mind. They're doing a bunch of cool stuff at McMaster University. They have a cool lab now called the LIVELab. You can even, I think now you can go in person again to cool concerts where you sit in a concert hall and they hook you up to sensors and you get to like watch music and awesome. Answer surveys and a bunch of stuff. So anyway, music cognition is sort of an umbrella term that we use to describe all of the connections between music and the brain. So it could connect to like how the auditory system works and why we hear music the way we do. The connection between like theory rules, like why don't we want parallel fifths? Well, it actually has to do with how your ear hears music and how your brain processes it. It also includes music development. So how kids hear language and music, how that changes through infancy and childhood, and how music can help them learn, and the effects of music education on the brain and on learning. So when we say cognition, we sort of mean the brain and learning and sensation and perception.
That is fascinating. That's such an important way of understanding music that obviously I don't know a lot about. I know, obviously, we've talked to people who know more about it, but it's a big part of also why I think there's so much explanation for why music education can be so beneficial. And that's sort of super cool. So in that sort of journey of going, and up until this point, going from like, hey, music's a thing I do on the side, to, oh, now it's like the main thing that I do as part of my life. Do you have any like major influences or like mentors who help guide you on that journey?
Totally. I would say my first major mentor in this whole area was Dr. Laurel Trainer, who was my supervisor and my boss at the Music in the Mind. She's also the director of the Auditory Development Lab, and she's an amazing flute player. So she had a journey similarly where she thought she would pursue science full-time, music full-time, didn't know. And now she directs this super cool organization and gives a lot of people those kind of opportunities. And she's like an inspiring woman. And so she was really influential on me in terms of how I could put those pieces of my life together. And then I've had lots of amazing instructors kind of come in and out of the Sarah McLachlan School of Music as I've worked there. A really amazing local artist in Vancouver, Don Pemberton, who directs the Roots and Wings Choir, another former colleague, Anna Banyosh, who used to direct the local vocals pre-COVID here in Vancouver. And then a little shout out to my program managers and local bass players, Toga Dor and Justin Gorey, who are just super inspiring teachers and musicians and collaborators in my world right now. Yeah,
that's awesome. I think that speaks to the sort of aspect that because music becomes such, or at least in my mind, music is sort of a lifelong thing, and you never stop having like influences and people who are like mentoring you from even like a peer position, where it's just like, I'm learning so much just from being around people. And that's something that I think is sometimes glossed over when we talk about like the art education journey generally, is like, no, it keeps going through your whole life.
Absolutely.
And it's really cool. And I've found that talking to a lot of like musicians is like, oh no, I still have people who I like see as influence, even though we're like hanging out and collaborating, which is really cool. To that end, can you think of any sort of like highlights in your career so far, things that have like made you go, dang, I'm really proud of that, or, oh, that was so cool?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say towards the end of my time working at McMaster at the Music and the Mind Institute, we got to anyone who's worked in research or in academics knows there's like a super long process until you get to the sort of publication, presentation kind of point of a study. But towards the end of working at McMaster, we published a sort of a larger scale study on the effects of early childhood music education. So those kind of parent taught programs and the benefits for the brain and for social skills and language skills early in life. And so we got to present that at conferences. And that was the first time I got to do media interviews about music cognition. So that was probably a highlight. I would say our partnership with the Canucks Autism Network would be like another highlight. It was really sort of this aha moment of having studied all of these different things about the brain and then also been a musician and then being like, no, you have to apply all of them all at the same time right now to work with these groups of kids. And last one would just be like I still get to work for Sarah McLachlan, and sometimes we get to perform with her, and that's still very exciting. It's kind of like a pinch yourself every time it happens kind of thing.
That was going to be an added question of just like, have you ever met Sarah McLachlan? Her name's on the school.
Yeah, totally.
That's so
she
cool.
comes in a lot. She's really involved, and she really likes meeting the kids and doing stuff with us. Yeah.
That's so awesome. And a cool addition to an already what sounds like very exciting and like great sort of job to have. The thing I want to follow up with is I have a background in like community music, which is really cool. And when you're reading about the Sarah McLachlan School of Music before we spoke and we talked about, and obviously hearing you describe it, it feels very much like in that sort of vein of that sort of like community service aspect.
Totally.
Do you see that sort of impact when you're like working with people, that sort of like, can you see the benefits when you're doing that kind of work because it is sort of community minded and providing access to people who wouldn't have had it otherwise?
Yeah, totally. I would agree with you that we're definitely using a lot of the community music philosophies and approaches. One thing that tends to happen if you're providing a service or if you're doing more of a traditional music education approach, you can still have these hidden barriers that come up. Maybe there's a focus on Western classical music that doesn't really resonate with a child who hasn't had a bunch of experience with that kind of music. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's other issues, food, transportation, friendship, access to social circles, and it's easy to kind of gloss those over if you're just thinking about things from a traditional kind of music school mindset. But approaching it from this community-based side allows us to kind of grow all of those things. You can see musical growth, but you can also see personal growth, social growth, the ability to succeed in school and in other areas of life.
That's awesome. And that's very cool, especially that sort of like bit about like access and engagement on like not limiting yourself to sort of one way of doing things is probably the best way to put it.
Totally.
And I think I know that's a really important part of like my own teaching. So it's nice to see that, and other schools in my area take that approach as well. So it's good to see that as like a thing that's happening across Canada, which is always really cool. I think the community aspects of that are like super important, that you highlighted there, are like super important, and they're a really important aspect of music education that we don't always get to talk about. And obviously, as a music educator, you've been doing this for an extended period of time, and you have a specific perspective. So, for you, why is music education important?
Great question. Big question. So I'd say there are a bunch of different parts of that, and I'll try to get to them for me quickly. I would say the first one is just music education is important because music is important. It's important to all cultures, all societies. It's important when you're born and when you get married and when you die and when you have religious ceremonies and when you go to work. It's like every culture has always had like participatory music. And so to like have it where you just only allow access to learning the language and the basic skills, like keeping a beat and singing in tune and understanding the language of music. Like if you only keep those to a certain number of people, then you're like cutting them off from a really important aspect of life. So I think it's important all on its own just for that reason. But additionally, from all the work and things that I've learned over the years, it has these connections to other skills. Learning music has connections to reading. It has connections to academic and memory skills. It has lots of connections to social skills. So playing music and being involved in musical activities at any age can help with social skills and social bonding. And then the one that I think is really important right now is music is a really good coping mechanism. So having music is a good lifeline for hard times. It's a way to get out emotions, and having the tools to be able to sort of express yourself, I think, can be really important in hard times, such as a global pandemic.
Yeah, no, there's a huge, and this is something that we've like talked about a little bit as Bandology, but also just like exists, is that music has huge benefits to mental health, and learning about how to use it for your own purposes as a tool of expression, regardless of if you want to be like a performer or a teacher or a person who makes stuff up, which is what I like to do, can have huge like mental health benefits. And I think that's really important. That's a thing that has been so nice about the pandemic. I know in my own life, to be able to go like, and now I'm going to just play something that sounds sad because I am in my apartment.
Totally.
And I have been for 6 months. But yeah, do you have any advice? Obviously you've had like sort of varied journey to get into music, which is really cool. Do you have sort of any advice for people interested in pursuing your sort of like career pathway and looking at the sort of science side or even the educational side of like music as a career?
Totally. I would say that, hello, youth of today, your music, if you're seeing this, your music teacher is probably already telling you to practice. So that's great. But I think that you need to know that there's way more to being a musician, and way more to teaching, and way more to learning about music than just practicing your instrument. So figuring out what you want to do in terms of other skills you can develop, other interests you have. I know lots of young musicians who are incredible teachers that have either pursued teaching in the school system, or maybe becoming a support worker in a program, becoming social workers, becoming occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, people who are pursuing things that are connected to their music journey. And I don't want you to not practice, but I want you to think about the other things that you can do in addition to practicing your instrument. And so that could be pursuing something like I did, which is like learning about the connection between music and other academic skills. But it could also be, spending some time on your website and writing your bio. And it could be networking with other musicians, and just there's a whole world of the other things that you want to make sure that you're balancing your time with.
Yes, practicing is a thing that you always should be doing. It is a means to an end within like music. It can be very fun, but there is so much on the side that you are not necessarily always prepared for, depending on like how your education goes and what opportunities you have access to about like what music as a career is like. So I really like that you brought that up, and that's a really valid point. And also I know so many people who started like, I'm going to play in a symphony, and are now doing super cool things that are so far outside of that. And if you want to play in a symphony, amazing, do it. But if you have to be aware that there's other extraordinarily cool, valid things that you can do outside of that.
Absolutely. And I know people who are doing a whole bunch of extraordinary, cool things, and every few months they audition for the one symphony job that's available. It's like, they still might do it. It's fine, but they've filled up their lives with cool things to do.
And also people who do both, they're in like community symphonies or in larger ones, and then do really cool stuff on the side. Which is always really awesome. So that's the bulk of our sort of like music on topic questions. And now we have our very fun rapid fire Fast Five. You ready?
Awesome. Okay. How fast?
As fast, honestly, just go as fast as you feel comfortable. Provide context when you need it.
Okay.
If you give a really weird answer, I might ask for context.
Okay.
But mostly we're going to go, it's a fun time. So number one, favorite movie soundtrack.
Favorite movie soundtrack, Arrival, that movie with Amy Adams. The soundtrack's by Johan Johansson, who very tragically passed away before he could compose even more amazing things. But also includes that On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter. So it has like the best of all worlds.
That is so cool. I have not actually heard that. I've not seen that movie, and I now want to check it out because that soundtrack sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Instrument you wish you played, question number 2.
Okay, so I have picked up the violin a lot of times and I wish I played it. I've never picked it up for long enough to get any facility or to not sound like a dying cat tuning wise.
Yeah, so. That's fair. I tried the viola once. It didn't go well.
The viola is so cool.
It's so good. I love the viola so much.
I feel like piano players or people who started with piano are like particularly tricky to get one of these instruments where like you're in charge of all the fine tuning at all times.
Yes, that was I teach piano and it's where I started, but I went to school for clarinet. That was the instrument that I played, and that's the one. So I was so hard, and it's so annoying that a piano player just sits down and whatever comes out they can't really control. It's just like the notes are the notes, and they're obviously playing way more notes at the same time than I am. But it was a point of envy my entire undergrad that people could sit down and I would have to match them.
Yes.
Worry about aligning with them. Yeah. So my hidden talent was the patience for dealing with that. What is your hidden talent? Question 3.
Okay. My hidden talent is I find that I'm the most organized person in a group of creatives, but I'm also the most creative group in a group of anyone who is not in a creative industry.
That is a good place to
fit in. Yeah.
That's a good place to be. I wish that was me in a lot of ways. So question 4, what's your favorite concert you attended?
Okay, so this is my only cool story is that in 2003 or 2004, I went to see a band at the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto, which is like a famous venue, but it's small. Mm-hmm. And you've probably been there. And the band that I was seeing was the Constantines. And then there was this band that nobody had heard of that got carpooled down from Montreal. And they started playing, and they had 2 women in the band playing like accordions and violins and pianos. And the whole thing was totally wild. And I became obsessed with them immediately and had no idea who they are. And that was Arcade Fire. And so that's my favorite concert I attended because it's a cool story to tell. And it was awesome and really inspiring.
Yeah, no, they're so cool live. I want to see them so badly. I cannot wait until live music is accessible again. Mostly so I can play it, but also so I can go see things that I haven't been able to.
I agree on both counts.
On both counts, yeah. And now, speaking of things we haven't been able to do, sort of the flip side of that, very pandemic question. What's the last show you binge watched?
Ted Lasso on
Great choice.
Apple TV. And then right before that, another one on Apple TV was For All Mankind, which was like the counterfactual world where NASA sent, among other things, women astronauts to space. So it was a very fun, kind of silly space show. And I really like space things.
That's so cool. Ted Lasso is amazing, but I have wanted to check out For All Mankind.
It's cool.
It's been on my list. So, thank you so much for coming and talk to us. Do you have any exciting plans, either like personally or new projects or at the Sarah McLachlan School of Music that you want to, talk about, share with us?
No, I hope so soon. I'm not sure. Yeah, things are just kind of maybe getting started again. We're doing some cool things at the Sarah School where we are opening up programs for senior students and alumni to come in and sort of finish projects. So often what happens in the education environment is we have like group goals and they have individual goals. But now they can set a goal that's like, I want to record an EP, and we're going to like help get them there. By having some extra time on the weekends that we're hoping to get lots of funding for, because I think it's a super cool program. So they get production time with a mentor, and they get some sort of studio time at the school to kind of bring their own projects to completion.
That's super cool. I love that project. I hope it all works out, because that's something, and I would have loved that as a student. Actually, as an adult, I would have loved that. That would be great.
Right. Well, and it's the kind of thing where it's like you need a lot of time and you need a lot of mentorship and a lot of help. And a lot of people don't have access to that kind of intensive stuff. And we want to make sure that the students who nope, I'm not going to say something about students being better than others. Forget what I said at the end. We just want to make sure that that students have access to the kinds of supports that we can offer, especially if they are super motivated to get an awesome project done for themselves.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I hope that all works out. And again, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. You've been viewing one of Bandology's many interview series videos. We have we have new stuff coming out every single Thursday for the rest of the year. I've been Sandy Wright, the Music and Education Coordinator at Bandology. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great evening.
Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, you can learn more about our organization at bandology.ca, which features information about music education, advocacy, and research, and our Play a Gig and Bandcamp programs. Follow us on social media for more videos, performance, and interviews on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.